Hi, everyone. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for waiting for me. I'm really happy to be talking about my favorite things, which are animal photojournalism and animals and storytelling. And that's basically what it's going to be. I will be storytelling, then I will be talking about storytelling and how to storytell, and then back to storytelling. We'll look at individual images. We will look at full stories, and I hope to give you some great tips on how to make what you're doing as an individual or as an NGO better. I think I might have been a little bit of a strange kid. Did you all also put up posters on your wall when you were a kid? Or do you still? I had a couple of, normal pictures, but then I had this from National Geographic. I took this out, I ripped this out from the magazine, and it's of a dead or a dying zebra. And in the eye of the zebra, you see the poachers. And this really affected me. I had this up on my wall for years, and I don't think I realized just how much this image would affect me as a young child. I must have been 8 years old or so. So I was always already having a sensibility of empathy and also sorrow for animals. Skip ahead probably 10 years later, and I was in Ecuador, and I came across this monkey who was chained to a windowsill. And there was a crowd of people around this animal. And it was one of the many instances I would find myself in a crowd of people taking a photo of an animal, but with a different intention. So people were taking this image just like me because they thought this was funny or cute or who knows what. But I took the image because I thought this was a problem. I thought this was sad. And I thought perhaps I could do something with this image. And that was in 1998. And that one it's not a good image, it's a photo of a photo. And it was when I was just beginning to learn how to take photos. Then I really, really wanted to be a photographer. And I really was beginning to be an animal rights activist. There was an opportunity to do an internship at Farm Sanctuary. And this is a place that houses hundreds of animals rescued from factory farming. But to be an intern at Farm Sanctuary, and this is me with Sunny doing the internship, you had to be vegan out of respect for the animals. And I thought, well, this is a very extreme thing. And I'm just going to do it for the duration of the internship. And then I'm going to go back to being a vegetarian or whatever I was, a pescatarian at the time. It seemed like if I was going to give up eating animals, I was going to be ostracized. I was going to be laughed at. I would have no support. Family meals would be a trauma, all of these things. So I went to Farm Sanctuary excited to do it and be with the animals. And on one of those first days, I was brushing a cow named Arbuckle. And oh yeah, an important detail here is that I did go and I was vegan when I was there, but I still had a pair of leather boots. And I just didn't want to have to buy a whole new pair of shoes just to do a 1 month internship. And so I decided to wear those leather boots and no one would know they were vegan. But I knew they were I knew that they were made of leather. And one day I was brushing Arbuckle and I had my camera and I looked down and our feet were lined up together. And I took a snapshot. I thought, oh, that's sweet. Look at our feet lined up together. But that was a big aha moment for me because as you know what I'm looking at here. I'm looking at my leather shoes and her leather legs, her flesh, her skin. And I really liked her. And it was the first time that I realized I was not going back from being vegan, which was scary. It was scary. I thought, oh, life's going to be hard as a vegan. But, that was 21, 22 years ago now. So that's a little bit of storytelling about how I got from A to B. It was more like A to B to C to D to E to F. It was a process. And at the time, I had created a project called We Animals. And I did We Animals as a solo person for about 15 years. And then I decided I wanted to be more strategic with what I was doing. There was too much work ending up on just the hard drive and not getting out into the world. And I knew that there were more and more people like me out there, investigators, photographers, who were telling these hard stories, particularly of factory farmed animals. And so we are now We Animals, the NGO. We have over 120 photographers, 14 team members, over 3,000 photos available to all of you and anyone else who's helping animals, and so on. So this is like a little braggable list here of some of our accomplishments. And I do want you to note that we have one animal photojournalism masterclass, which teaches people how to well, the things we're talking about today, how to do animal photojournalism, which I will refer to as APJ for short for the rest of this presentation. Okay. So these farmed animals, we farm all sorts of animals, and we keep these animals in the billions every single moment of every single day. On the left, we have what we call broiler chickens. This individual can no longer walk. Shatabdi Chakrabarti took this photo on the right. She's one of our wonderful contributing photographers. This is of a chicken in a cage along with thousands of others crammed into these cages. Like I said, we farmed all sorts of animals, including foxes and raccoon dogs for fur, alligators for their flesh and their skins, and we even farm octopuses. Now, I just want to check with you all. Can you see the image of the octopus, or are the panel of your faces covering that slide? Oh, sorry. Are you all able to see the image of the octopus, or is it covered? You can see it. Great. Okay.
It's visible, Jo. Yeah.
Great. Okay. I'm not able to see the chat at this time, so I couldn't see any notes. Okay. At We Animals, we also document the incredible scale of farming, how mechanized it is. Like this picture on the left, what you're seeing are veal crates, tens of thousands of veal crates. And this image is shot from so high up with a drone that you could even see the vast clouds, the shadows of the vast clouds. And it's always important to not just show systems, but who is oppressed by the systems, who is trapped in the systems. And that's why I've included here an image of a calf as an example of one of the tens of thousands of calves who would be kept alone without their mothers in these systems. And we have to fight for the little guy now too. Speaking of mass farming, we now know that we mass farm insects. And we may not care much about insects, and all that makes science all the more important. Ichthyology is the study of fish. Entomology is the study of insects. Am I getting that right? Anyway, what I do know is that ethology is the study of animal behavior. And we really have to use that as activists and advocates for animals, because the more we can share animal behavior with the images we're showing, the more we can bring these photos to life. For example, on the right, we have a dung beetle. And it's fascinating to know that dung beetles chart their way at night by following the Milky Way. Amazing. And of course, we farm fish when we pull them from the ocean, and we don't have numbers for fish. There are too many of them. So, as with pigs and other animals, we might be able to say X billion a year. With fish, we simply attempt to count them by the ton. What you're seeing, by the way, are images from all over the world from our various photographers. But luckily, with animal photojournalism, we tell stories of change and progress and hope and empathy as well. So you saw a fish in a net in the last picture, but here what you're looking at on the left is plant-based salmon, and on the right, cell-grown salmon. And back to the importance of ethology, it's so important to use what we've learned to make that point again about what animals are like, how they are complex, so that we can share that with the world. The more we use science and have science and research, the more we have proof that animals should not be treated as we do. This is Ginger and Aaron. Aaron was a former undercover investigator. I love this picture. I try and put it into all my presentations. Stories of change and progress, stories of hope. They're so important. Images can really traumatize people, as you know. It's hard to get people to look at the images of pain that are true, that we capture in the world. But what are the stories of good? Well, for example, most people don't know that we can have a relationship like this. A cow. This is Jean in the t-shirt, not the black and white person. Jean in the t-shirt is the co-founder of Farm Sanctuary. And that's Opie on his left. But that's Opie in the picture on the left as well. When Jean was doing an investigation, he found Opie, who was, still wet from birth and about to freeze to death. And he took that calf from the farm, put him in his car, brought him to Farm Sanctuary, and with his staff, nursed Opie back to health. And Opie had a fantastic life with friends in his pastures with his people for 14 years. And I really enjoy that picture of Jean and Opie because you can see the beauty and the potential. Now we're going to move over to photojournalism, what it is, what it can do. And as we know, that photojournalism shapes history. That's my favorite thing about it. Both historically and today, photojournalism brings war home. It brings problems home. Many of you will recognize these images from what they call Napalm Girl to the young child in India after the Bhopal tragedy that was shot by Raghu Rai. Incredibly influential images here. However, photojournalism is about the human condition, and wildlife photography is exclusive to wild animals. And so I found myself over years and years, people, trying to understand what it was I did, and they couldn't. They only had the categories they knew. Oh, you're a photojournalist, but it's animals. That doesn't make sense. Or, oh, so I guess you're a wildlife photographer. Or you're a pet photographer. No, I'm really not those things. So we're going to give this a genre, and we're going to call it very simply animal photojournalism. And we're going to do this because it includes everybody. I'm going to give you just a few of the tenets of animal photojournalism, and just know that this is a preliminary definition. This is something we created a couple of years ago, and I'm writing more about that now. Oh. Someone named Laura, you are unmuted. Okay, that gave me a chance to have a sip of my tea. Okay, so these are just a few details of that, of what animal photojournalism is, and these will evolve over time. But for now, predominantly, APJ covers the broad human-animal conflict and its resultant ecosystems of suffering. This is a terribly shocking image. And I will point out that you can see that it's listed as anonymous. It was shot by anonymous. And probably about a dozen of our photographers use pseudonyms at We Animals, and that's in order to protect themselves, often in their own countries, from the work that they are doing. People can be persecuted for telling the truth and for doing APJ. I'm very grateful to these people who really, really stick their necks out to document these atrocities. What you're seeing are birds being live buried, and this is because there's an outbreak of an avian flu. So the next part of the definition is, from public health and environmental crises to zoonotic viruses, APJ shows that animals are inextricably linked to many areas of current global concern. No kidding. Animal photojournalism aims to encourage swift and necessary change on behalf of the beings in the frame. And this states that it is advocacy work. we have a purpose to the work. This is a conflict in journalism. This is part of why we don't get published sometimes, because people say you're advocates, or you have an angle, or you have a soapbox. And so that is one of the struggles of APJ, honestly. It is relevant to current news, and it shapes conversations about its subject matter. Here's a photo of a flooded farm. This likely has thousands of turkeys in it. APJ is used to further political, philosophical, and scientific thinking. It is invested in contributing to current worldwide campaigns to lessen and end exploitation. So there is that advocacy subjective angle again. APJ descends in part from conflict photography, and that the photographer is exposing a story that is kept hidden from the public by political and economic agendas. Therefore, these images are necessary catalysts for change. I like this part. APJ demands radical empathy and self-awareness. We need to be open. We need to not turn away from this work. Viewers must decenter themselves and consider the world through the eyes of a different species, while holding the truth of humanity's undeniable role in the story. This is the hard work that we don't want to do, isn't it? Holding ourselves accountable. It's very, very painful when we open our eyes to understanding what we have been capable of. It's an uphill battle to get people to see that and to look. So wrapping up this definition with 2 more slides. As with conflict photographers, APJs must put themselves at physical and psychological risk in order to document a practice or an event. That's me climbing a truck at the Turkish-Bulgarian border. And we put ourselves at financial risk too, because we can be in jeopardy of lawsuits and jail time and so on. And lastly, in common with humanitarian and conflict photographers, we can also suffer from long-term psychological effects resulting from bearing witness to violence and injustice towards others. Okay, a few notes about how we can do better as storytellers. Remember at the beginning of the talk, I mentioned that image of the capuchin monkey, and I was standing there with lots of other people taking the same image. That's going to happen to you a lot as a documentarian. I was at an aquarium in Canada called Marineland. It's a terrible place. And here I was, once again, standing with lots of people taking the same picture. I wanted to show Kiska's life, and she lives alone in this barren tank. But, fundamentally, I got an image that looks quite like what any image anyone would get. So how could I make this better? Well, it was really about the narrative. We often have to do research and really understand what's going on to bring the picture to life. And the more I learned about her life, the more awful this picture became. She had been caught off the coast of Iceland over 4 decades ago with other orcas. They had all died. She had been inseminated and she had given birth several times. Her babies all died. And when you learn just how far they can go in the wild and that they live in matrilineal packs, when I observed that it took her less than a minute to circumnavigate this tank, I thought about the math of that and how many times had she done that in this barren tank. And it's when I write about these details and talk about, what they're like in the wild versus what they're like in a tank, it really brings the stories to life. And also I appreciated this image because of the pointing. Pointing is not something we do to people. It's impolite. And it's objectifying, isn't it? So this is an example of how to amplify your story. It's a bit of the same thing with this chimpanzee named Ron. And it's a good picture. It's interesting. It's a bit unusual, but you need to know what's going on. And what you need to know is that he was kept in a tiny cage, suspended above the ground as though he was a little canary or something. Not that canaries should be kept in cages either. For over 2 decades. He had been sedated so many times for surgeries. I'm going to skip over the horrific details, but the details will turn people off and make people not want to look at this picture. And so you have to find a way. And the more I learned about him, the more I saw in his files, well, not the more I saw in his files that he and I were born 2 months apart. And I thought, wow, Ron and I are the same age. And let's think about our lives. Let's think about the fact that, when I was 2, I was cradled by my mom, and I was lucky to be in a warm, happy family. And he'd already been taken away from his mom, if he'd ever been with his mom. Had his mom been killed? Was he a pet or a performer? By the time we were 8, I was out climbing trees, but he was the one who should have been climbing trees. But he had already spent his whole life being used for research in a cage. I went to university as a late teen, and when he was a late teen, I was studying, but he was being studied, still a life without enrichment, and so on and so forth. You understand where I'm going. But he was rescued, and that's where I took this picture of him. And though he had a big sanctuary in which to roam around, he chose to stay indoors, and he would make this nest for himself because that's where he felt most comfortable. And it's in that nest that he died peacefully but prematurely, which is a common fate for chimpanzees used in research. Just one more image of how to bring a story to life. So obviously this has an element of intrigue already, doesn't it? Like what the hell is going on here? We've got a giraffe and we've got an IKEA parking lot. Now, okay, the image needs to stand alone. Like that's interesting. We kind of get that the giraffe is no longer in the African savannah. But how else can I bring this image to life? I made some notes here, so I'm gonna look at these and read from these as well. So there's what you can photograph, but there's also what you can't photograph, which is a lot. We don't have access to a lot of places. I don't have access to this giraffe's entire life. So we have to think about what was before and what's coming and enliven our images with that information. Some of the notes I made here. So I can't distinguish if this giraffe was caught in the wild or bred in captivity, but I need to bring that thought and that idea to my audience. Were they transported overseas after being torn from their family? Were they torn from friends when they were sold between zoos? Did some of their friends and family die before their eyes? And I can't truly show their fear and their loneliness, can I? I can try, but it's something we should think about. Are those emotions that they are experiencing? I can't show that this giraffe isn't roaming the African savannas and choosing when to eat, run, play, and sleep. I can't show when he will be killed because he has fallen off a transport truck and broken his leg, or when he's deemed surplus. So the point of all this is like what is beyond our view must still be in the picture. We have to infuse that into the picture so that people can think more broadly about what they're looking at. And also and always, these stories relate to more than the animal in the picture, almost always. Like, for example, the image on the left, it's also about human rights. It's not about the pigs, just about the pigs who are slaughtered there. It's about the people who might be unpapered or illegal immigrants and underpaid. It's a dangerous job. So there's so much that we can infuse with these stories and remind people there are many ways to get people to care. We need to care about the humans in the picture too. We also have to care about the environment in the picture. What you're seeing on the right are fur farms, massive fur farms in Canada, and which cause a lot of pollution in that province. I'm going to take a sip of my tea. Thank you. Okay, now I'd like to share with you a story. And it's about Stockton, which is a town that I visited. And maybe I'll just tell the story and then I'm going to break it down about why I feel it's an important and interesting story. So in Stockton, this is a town that became so impoverished that the town itself declared bankruptcy. It is full of unhoused people. There are street dogs and street cats everywhere. By the way, this is in California, which is an extremely rich state. So this is quite unusual. Impoverished town, impoverished people, animals everywhere, and interestingly, 4 slaughterhouses in one small town. And this one, they kill birds every day. And this young woman, Danielle Jenkins, goes to the slaughterhouse several times a month. And about once a month, they actually give her chickens. They understand that she's there to bear witness and they're supportive of her. Here are a few photos of what the town looks like. The slaughterhouse is attached to the butcher, so people can walk in and buy the animals. And on the bottom right, you see people. This is where people live in the ravine. We have tents, we have people on the street. It's a really rough place. And so I was there to photograph Danielle, and so it went that this worker grabbed chicken and looked carefully both ways and quickly handed the chicken over to Danielle. This is so beautiful. And it also dispels this whole, like good versus bad. This worker genuinely was happy to see the release of these chickens. It's so easy to make things black and white. It's so easy to just vilify. And so how beautiful this was happening. Then he gave her another chicken. And at this point, there were a few other activists around, including veterinarian Crystal Heath. And the animals had blood drawn. They went off to get care, and they would eventually end up at a sanctuary. And as I said, other activists were showing up. They had heard a few of us were gathering there today. And they said, well, why don't we see if we can help a few dogs today? Street dogs everywhere. Let's ask the locals who belongs to who. And it can be kind of scary, to be in a foreign place and just to talk to all sorts of new people, or, people who are shooting up and doing drugs on the street. It was intimidating for me. And yet, all of these people are normal people, and they came over and they said, oh, you're trying to help the dogs. That's great. And I don't want to classify everyone as drug users. They weren't, but just all sorts of people who are really down and out. And you're trying to help the dogs. Well, this dog's mine, this dog's taken care of, but that dog over there, that dog's been on the streets in this neighborhood for 6 weeks, and no one's looking after that dog, so you can take that dog. So all of a sudden we found ourselves with 1 dog, 2 dogs, 3 dogs, and they were going to go to foster and then be adopted. And it became a community effort. So this was really unexpected. This was really beautiful. Then there was this man. He was a mechanic. He was working on a car on the side of the road. And he's just sort of watched what we were doing. And he said, I have lots of dogs over at my place. And, we acknowledged that and nodded, but we were busy picking up dogs off the street. And we didn't really, pay close attention. And then someone came over and said, guys, go to Fernando's place. He's got lots of dogs. And I thought, okay, well, interesting. We've been invited to someone's place. Let's do it. And so we followed him down the street. And his place, this incredibly generous man, doesn't have a place. He has a little hut that he built in the ravine. That's the ravine behind him. He sleeps in his car, and he lets dogs, lots and lots of dogs, stay in that hut. He's a really kind man. Fernando, even though he had several jobs, mechanics, construction, cleaning the tombstones in the local cemetery, he still couldn't make enough money to have a proper roof over his head. And even though he couldn't have a house, he was looking after 28 dogs in this little hut. And he invited us all in, and sure enough, here were some of the puppies. He was feeding them all. He told us that his friends and other people said, just kill them. This is too many animals for you. And he said, animals deserve to live. and I'm not killing them. I'm just going to do my best. And we all looked at each other and we're like, okay, I guess we're doing a lot of rescues today. And we asked him about this, and he cried and he said, God is visiting me today. And so people started picking up armfuls of dogs and calling for more cars to come and pick up animals. And it was collaborative. It was wonderful. He needed help too, and so someone started a Kickstarter for him as well as for the veterinary fees. People came back in subsequent weeks and helped him cover some fees. They met his daughter. They took his daughter for ice cream, and made this a community thing. And they're helping the dogs, and they're helping him. It was really unexpected. There were many things here. There was community, intrigue, surprise, action, support, compassion. And it did remind me of this quote, very famous quote by Leo Tolstoy. When the suffering of another creature causes you to feel pain, do not submit to the initial desire to flee from the suffering one, but on the contrary, come closer, as close as you can, and try to help. And this is a photo of him with his mechanic's hands holding one of the puppies that he cares so much about. Now, this story, all of us can shoot this story. It was so exciting. I didn't know what I was just going to a community. I was just going to do one thing. But it's an example of just getting out in the world as a photojournalist and putting the journalist in photojournalism. Put your journalist cap on and ask questions and listen when people say, hey, I've got a few dogs, do you want to come over? And really incredible things can unfold. This all happened in less than 3 hours, and a beautiful story developed that from that. So I encourage you all to just go to where little things are happening, because you don't know what's going to develop. Stay longer, ask questions, and you will have much stronger stories to tell from that. I'm just going to give a few images of how animal photojournalism shapes things and the kind of things that you can record. So this is a humane education class being taught by Sepoe Satole. She's one of the all-female anti-poaching unit called the Black Mambas in South Africa. And when she's not on the range protecting animals, she is in schools teaching kids how to be more compassionate. There are changes happening on the federal level, and you can photograph those efforts. Of course, people are usually behind desks and not out in the streets, but this is the Dutch Party for Animals, where their ultimate goal is to ban factory farming. But in the meantime, they have banned fur farming and the import of trophy hunts from Africa, and all sorts of great efforts. And then at the civic level, all sorts of us are protesting and speaking up and going to City Hall and taking 5 minutes to make a point. So this was really cute. This was in Toronto. People took time out of their busy day to speak up at City Hall about implementing a ban on imports of shark fin products. Hundreds of people came, and I showed up. It could have been really boring, but sorry, boring to photograph. That's what I mean. But people dressed up as sharks. It was really fun. And the ban was successful. There's so much food we can photograph all over the world. We know that plant-based food doesn't look like cardboard, and it doesn't taste like it either. It looks like this, and we can inspire people through our photography. On the left, we have some pretty sad pictures, a bear in a cage, a beluga whale in a tank. We can just go, we can buy a ticket and go to these places. If you're worried about giving money to a zoo or to a circus, I understand that. I wanted to find ways to break into these places, so I wasn't giving them my $10 or my $20. But it's actually a good investment in animal advocacy. Spend a few dollars to get in and work at getting images that show how animals are living there. And on the right, we have a sanctuary. So you can also go to sanctuaries and photograph the happier lives that animals are living and leading. You can go to circuses This was at a circus in France that uses wild animals. And the year I took these photos, there was a huge push to ban the use of wild animals in circuses. And that was successful the following year. And so I encourage people with cameras to go and find out what the NGOs in your country need, what are they working on, and take images that will help them in their campaigning. These are examples of images I shot for partnerships that led to oh, getting noticing is that true? Can you hear me?
Yes, Joe. Yeah.
Can you not? Great. Okay. Give me a signal if I get choppy. If there is fur farming in your country, you can document fur farms or animals rescued from fur farms. This was me just a few weeks ago in Poland, where there is an extraordinary push to end fur farming. It was very unusual to hold a fox, I will say. This was at a sanctuary, and this was a fox who had been rescued and could not be rewilded. And interestingly, someone handed her to me, and I was like, no, 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 no. I feel like I should not hold a fox. We should not, none of us should have the right to hold a fox. But she likes being cuddled. Oh my gosh. She was making these chattering sounds and she was pushing herself into me. It was unbelievable. You know what? What a moment, like to be holding a fox that like that should never really happen, right? So what can I do with that moment? What can I learn from it? What can I say about it? And I think my confusion is like expressed on my face. My existential fatigue over this issue is expressed on my face there. But I'm happy to say that her name is Elwirka and she has a very, very good life at the sanctuary. And the last thing I will say about her is that interestingly, she prefers to live with cats than with other foxes. Photography, animal photojournalism is changing so much in the photo world. You would not be able to have this image published in wildlife competitions, for example, because it's upsetting. It's a wild animal, but it's in captivity. You can't put that in our competition. But it's really important for APJs to submit their images to international competitions so that we can see this kind of dynamic. So this is an image by Adam Oswald that won one of the biggest awards in the world. And that meant millions of people had an opportunity to consider this kind of treatment of animals. And also, it created such a problem for the zoo that they stopped using their elephants in performances. And we can go to rescues, we can go to natural disasters. I'm really happy to see that it's not just dogs and cats being rescued now, it's farmed animals. I think that image on the right is just too cute. And also, unfortunately, horrifically, we have war zones everywhere now. And we can do things like go safely, and show, for example, that the human animal bond should not be broken by war. This is outside of Ukraine at the Polish border, people fleeing and people fleeing with their animals because they were able to do so. Fundamentally, to wrap up the presentation, what I want to say is very simple. We have to make people fall in love. People protect what they love, and people are infused with inspiration to do so when you make them fall in love. And that is one of the greatest gifts of photojournalism. We have to get people to fall in love with stories, with the ideas that stories hold, with possibilities, and with animals. That is my presentation. And there is a QR code here or our website that leads to us where you can find our masterclass on storytelling and 30,000 images that you can use for your advocacy. And there are links to where you can pitch stories to us and pitch a request about submitting images to us as well. Okay, so with that, I'll stop sharing. Hi.
Thank you, Joe. That was simultaneously really, really hard to watch in places, and I found myself turning off my video because it just got a bit much.
I saw you
Um,
doing that.
yeah, but it was one of the most powerful things that I've seen in recent times, and thank you so much because
Oh,
I think the work you do can it can really help people change their minds about how they view the world, how they view animals, and I think that's so important. Sorry, I'm just like
yeah.
blubbering, but yeah,
Take your time.
that's just the that's just the impact of that's exactly it. I'm not going to apologize for it because that's really what we are talking about, the power of images to really that make us stand, put us in the shoes, look at the world through the eyes of the animal that's suffering, really, you know.
I
So,
like that you started saying in the shoes, but like, oh well, I guess they don't really wear
yeah,
shoes. So
exactly. Yes, exactly. Yeah, I know. We just thought that we'd do a little bit of a conversation where we ask you some questions and then everyone in the audience can ask you some questions. There were a couple of, photographs that you had shown about, the Nam girl as well as Raghu Rai's photograph that's familiar to everyone in India, really. Can you think of photographs in from the animal advocacy world that have really lit up the public imagination or have captured attention and that have been influential in bringing about change?
perhaps still not at that level as the image of
Hmm.
Raghu Rai and others, but there have been images that I'll give an example of a recent image, and it was in the presentation. It was the aerial shot of those veal hutches.
Right.
That continues to rock many people because we don't have idea of scale. It's very hard to
Mm,
shoot scale in a meaningful way. And we know that when we talk about numbers, we can't feel those numbers. And it's the same with humanitarian photography. You can say, 10,000 refugees arrived this week. You can
exactly.
say 1 million people were displaced. All of these
Mm,
things that we can't feel. So it's unusual to be able to give a sucker punch, a punch to the heart with numbers. And that image has affected so many people. We had all sorts of famous people around the world sharing it, people who we didn't even know cared about animals, like Hilary Swank, the actress. And all of
oh,
a sudden,
wow.
she was talking about this image. And um, yeah, and I think that's because it's surprising. A really important element in storytelling it are twists and turns and elements of surprise. There's a story we did recently, which is getting a lot of visibility, and it's a horse in a slaughterhouse,
Mhm.
but the horse is blind. And this is again this element of surprise, and it's shocking because we feel appalled. Like we don't want to look at horses being slaughtered, but when you think a blind horse going through this, and the photographer has documented the animal experiencing this, and you're just putting yourself in their shoes, in their place, what must it be like to have your legs yanked from underneath you and landing on the ground and all of these violent things when you can't see? And so again, it's important to be journalists and to ask questions and to know these details and bring those details forth to us. I'll give one more example of, of the kind of impactful image that goes farther with animals in the world. It's when it shows not just the individual but the circumstance.
Mm,
I have an image of a calf in a crate. No, a calf in a wheelbarrow, and she's still wet from birth. She's 20 minutes old, and in the background, you see the long row of crates, and you see a man preparing a crate, and it tells the whole story. So some images need storytelling and need context and need facts and figures, but some of them just sum it all up. And for me, that is always what I'm trying to achieve in my photos. Like some of the most impactful pictures which contradicts what I said about the image of the aerial image of the veal crates. But some of the most impactful images are where the whole story is there. You can take in the entire thing on your own without any hand holding. And I find that those images travel very far, and they have longevity.
Mm. Yes, I found the photograph of Kiska that you had, and with the fingers pointing. I mean, that was just so powerful because you're so right. We don't point it. I mean, we've been taught since we were children not to point because it's impolite. But we don't think twice about doing that to animals, right? So that was a very, very powerful photograph. Another question, really, and after that, since we have little time, maybe I will just give after this question, everyone else can chime in. Um, you talked about radical empathy at one point that, viewers have to summon forth radical empathy. At the same time, when here the audience is really people who advocate for animals. And when you go into a room full of people who are not in that space, who there could be other emotions like guilt or denial about the role that human beings play in the suffering of these animals. So, how does radical empathy work in a situation like that? Because human nature is to look away, to deny, to push away, to run away, actually. So, what is that struggle that the photojournalist goes through to be able to not compel, maybe gently persuade people to look at the suffering in the face, look the suffering in the face? Yeah.
Okay, Bharati, what you've just said is you've described the problem very well of accessing people, and you have a very good understanding of why people want to turn away. You've described it exactly as it is. We are trying to reach past people's guilt and their denial. And that's very difficult. And this is, I think we're all as storytellers trying to find ways of doing that. And there are ways, but we have to fundamentally understand that to ask people to look at these images is to ask them to look in a mirror and to look at their complicity. And human beings don't want to do that. It is incredibly painful. And it's incredibly painful because generally we're good people. We don't perpetuate these atrocities because we're all vile and evil. These systems are vile and evil, but people are generally in the world trying to provide for their friends and family and do their best. And people are generally good people. So when you show them a horrific image, it's a huge challenge to them because they can't believe that we caused it and that they caused it. And so the reaction that probably many of you have seen is excuses, reasons, trying to find a way to make this okay, which makes us very uncomfortable and it makes us angry. And it makes us think like, well, how can my family traditions be wrong? Or how can what we've always done be wrong? You are obviously an extremist. This is obviously not true. This obviously happens in other countries and not mine, and so on. And so we have to start there with people. When I started taking these pictures, I thought that I would hold up these pictures to the world and people would be shocked and they would stop participating in the systems. I was very sad and shocked and angry to see that this is not what happens. And it's because we have to reach people where they are at in all sorts of ways, whether it's across the dinner table in conversation. We have to remember that most of us were meat eaters or, dairy drinkers and all this as well. We know what it's like. We have to really, truly understand every day that we are in a system that invisibilizes this. And people are going to be surprised, shocked, guilty, and denial. And you have to work with them and you have to be nice to them. When you say to someone, 9 million pigs are raised in a state. Let's say I'm in North Carolina, sitting at a table with North Carolinians, and I say, we talk about animals. I'm not going to say, do you know that 9 million animals are raised in 9 million pigs are raised in this state, and like and look at them in an accusatory way. You have to just tell them the facts, share the facts with people, and and allow people to be curious, and give space for people to ask questions and share information. Don't cast judgment. So I'll leave it at that. Lots more to say on that.
Yes.
And yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Now I'm going to just open it up to the room. If anybody would like to ask questions, please just unmute yourself and speak up. I'm not asking you to put the questions in the chat because then I'll have to read it out. So we might as well just hear your voices. If you're comfortable with that, that is. Forrest, okay, all right. So let me read the question out. How do you find most animal photojournalists fund their work/art? How do most fellow animal photographers financially support themselves in a way where they have the time, energy, money to focus on their work/art?
Thank you for that great question, because I want animal photojournalists and artists to be realistic about this. And if you're going to have a career as a photojournalist, it takes a lot of time. You have to really, really work at it, and you have to hustle. Nothing is handed on a silver platter unless you're, very rich and extremely lucky. I did wedding photography, food photography, corporate photography, portrait photography for the first 15 years of my career, probably longer, in fact. And I used that money to pay for what I called the good stuff, which was the animal work. And so I would save. And the minute I had a little bit of money to do an internship, to go overseas to work with an NGO, I would spend my own money to do that. And then I developed a reputation for my work. And then slowly I found that NGOs were emailing me and saying, hey, can you come and do this for investigation with us in Sweden? We can't pay you, but we can pay for you to get there, and you can sleep on our couches, and, it'll basically be free. And I was like, yes, yes, I'll work for free on this very important thing. But then I had a bigger body of work, which led to work. And so I do want people to be realistic. Certain jobs just take a long time to be a full-time job, and it's freelance work, really. And so you often have to combine art and photojournalism and this type of thing with other work until it sustains itself. However, We Animals offers a number of things. So we give assignments to photographers. We partner with NGOs and build out assignments, and then we look for photographers in those regions who can do the work with us, videographers as well. Excuse me. And we also have annual fellowships. For the last 2 years, we've given 2 fellowships per year, and that comes with $6,500 Canadian, which is about maybe $5,000 US, for 6 months to work on an animal photojournalism project. You can also go to NGOs and tell them you have expertise, and do they need you to do a shoot, and can they pay you something to do a shoot? It literally pays to ask. And so I think it's important to knock on doors and make people understand, or show people that you take good photos and that you can be useful to them, and go from there.
Excuse me, can I just ask my question here? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Hi, Jo-Anne. I very much appreciated your lecture. I like the idea that you said that you have make people love situations and animals. Anyway, now my question is actually an old one. We are a small NGO, and we try, obviously, to get to people. And the question is always, do we show those horrible scenes from pig slaughtering or pig houses, or do we show the nice piglet in the arms of someone looking to you? What is the...
Yes, we must be very strategic about that. And I think that many activists have a habit of leading with the worst, because, like I said, I used to think that would influence people, but it does make people turn away. And so we have to be very strategic about how and where we use the images in order to not have them turn away. Always remember that people want to turn away. And so how are you going to keep them from doing that? And so I think, on websites, it's good to lead with, happy images, piglets in fields, and give context, say, sanctuary pictures so people don't think this is what a farm looks like. And then prepare people for the harder images. If it's on social media, you can start with something more gentle and then have text saying what you're about to see is hidden suffering, secrets kept by the industry. Just talk people into it and talk people through it. We do need to see those, to show those hard images, but give context. Tell them why you're showing them this image today, why it's important today. And it's because you were there last week and you saw this thing, and like I'm thinking social media, like have text first, have that nicer image first. I'll leave it at that, but they are important, but right place, right time. Our book Hidden, is exhibited all over the world by people who are saying these images of violence need to be in a gallery. And so we're going to have them in a gallery, and we're going to have speakers for them, and we're going to have presentations there and so on. And so that's contextual, and people can hear there's an interesting exhibit and go to it. And you can make books, and you can make things where people can reach for them. I'll leave it at that, because it seems like a lot of questions are coming in.
Thank you, Jo. I'm going to read.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Claudine. I'm reading Amrita's question. Jo, how do you approach the people in the slaughterhouses or animal markets without having them be defensive or aggressive? How do you manage your emotions there, seeing the suffering? If you have an emotional response, does it put them off? And do they ask you to leave? How would you advise creating a connection with the people to be able to access these places?
Hey, there was like 7 questions there. Okay, I'll try and get through them. Okay, you have to lead with open curiosity. That's how you gain access. I don't tell people my points of view. So there is a level of deception, and that is historically common in investigative journalism. Whether you're doing humanitarian or environmental work or animal advocacy work, you don't go in and state your opinion on things. You go in with genuine curiosity. And if your curiosity is not genuine, people will pick up on that and not be open to you. But whether it's a market or a farm or a rodeo, go in and ask people how this works. What's going on? Say you've never seen it before, which could be true. And is likely true, because you've perhaps, even if it's in a live animal market where you've been several times, you've never stopped to take a good look at the animals in the cage or tied up by the neck. You've never stopped to ask people about their livelihood. How many animals do they bring here today? How do they get slaughtered? Is it hard? Is it hard on them? Is it hard on the animals, or is it easy? Gain information. And I try not to lead with my camera first. I try and be around and talk with people a little bit, and then say, can I take a picture? And sometimes if I am in a market and I'm taking pictures first and I see that people are looking at me, I go straight to them and I say, hi, this is interesting. I've never seen this before. Tell me what's going on. And then they relax and tell you what's going on. And then I guess coping. Yes, the other part was coping while there. My job is to get the best possible pictures in the shortest amount of time. And sometimes I have 3 minutes and sometimes I have 3 hours, but I don't know. So I go into all shoots assuming that it's going to end at any moment. And I am looking at the situation, the entire situation with empathy, but not leading in any way with my sorrow. I'm there as a curious journalist and I can deal with my emotions later. I'm not saying it's easy, but that's what works.
There's another question from Forrest. How do you personally cope with the secondhand trauma of bearing witness, or how do you encourage others to do so?
It's a $1 million question. How do I cope? Well, I do cope by taking action. I will never say that this is easy. It is a lot of us who bear witness. Even if you're looking at pictures on social media, you're bearing witness. This can be extremely traumatizing. I'm not sure that there's a way to avoid that, especially for empathetic people. So it's how you look after yourself. It's how you walk yourself through it. And we all have different mechanisms for that. And it's just that we should do it. We should acknowledge. I am extremely traumatized by the violence of the world. So how do I live joyfully? And we have to live joyfully. We have this one life, this one precious life. So I live joyfully, and because I want to. I am aware every moment of every day of the immense suffering in the world. It's scary and it's traumatizing, not just the animals, but the war is going on right now. It's extremely traumatizing. But I try not to, I actively work on not living in that headspace, because then my energy is drained and then I'm not being an activist. And I will admit that this year I was working too much. My hours were too long, self-imposed. And I was thinking too much about the various wars going on in the world, in addition to the war against animals. And I could barely be an activist. I just had no voice, I had no energy. And I'm on a writing retreat right now. I'm on a 1 week writing retreat, and this is like fuel for my soul. And we need that. We need to just give ourselves permission to recover, to acknowledge the trauma, but like live outside of the trauma. And so I actively choose every week to live outside of the trauma. You have to do it. You can't just like think it and, oh yeah, I'll do that. That's a good idea. You really have to practice. It's a practice.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
What do you, there's Kathleen Johnson. What do you tell yourself to keep or return to on your path of not judging? Your energy is absolutely incredible, but you've also seen so much.
Well, we all know what it's like to be judged, don't we? It's awful. It's very painful to be judged, whether it's by a family member or someone we don't know. I find that when I'm judged, I go on for weeks fighting with that person in my head, stewing over it, thinking about my replies and like defending myself. And it is such a waste of energy for them and for me. And I just think that, people haven't learned yet. And most of the people in all of the world have not taken in animal suffering in a way that they can possibly comprehend, because it's so big and it's so painful. People want to move away from this. And so it's not that I don't get mad. I mean, I'm pretty mad a lot of the time I'm very mad all the time about what's going on, but I'm not going to take that out in judgment towards others. I'm just going to think, there are opportunities for learning. I'm going to do my best. I assume the best in this person. I try to, it can be hard. I assume that this person is a really compassionate person. And if given the material in the right way, they might, change their mind about their consumption habits. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. While we still have a lot of people here, I'm going to ask the question that I'm really very, very excited about, which is what is in store for We Animals in the coming year? What are you looking forward to, and what are your plans for India?
Yes, yes,
Ta-da!
yes.
Yes.
Well, let's just skip right to India.
Yes.
So, with India, uh, well, We Animals is in a unique position to teach something and to capacity build on something that not a lot of people have the skills for, which is storytelling. That is a muscle we need to flex. It's a story. It's a muscle we need to flex and practice and build. And I have that's my skill. That's my skill set. I can teach that. And I do teach that globally through webinars, short and long. And I do go to other countries and spend time with people in the field, in the classroom, talking about what makes stories better and stronger and how to improve our photos and our storytelling. And so with FIAPO, I will be in India for 3 weeks. And this is going to be the best, most exciting thing I do in 2025. And I'm going to be meeting a lot of people who want to improve their animal photojournalism and their storytelling. And we're going to work on that together. And of course, the point of this is to create thousands more animal photojournalists, thousands more people who are stronger at storytelling, because we know that stories are a universal way to speak. And sometimes they don't need language at all. So it's capacity building, and there's some public talks as well, Bharati, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Does that sound about right?
Absolutely. That is, so we're still working on that, Diana. It's most likely February. And
Starting in
that's
February.
starting in February, yes. And over a 3-week period, we feel that we can have a 5-city program, and with public talks as well as workshops. And Joe, thank you. I really want to say this because this is such an important skill for animal advocates, that I think this is a huge, huge opportunity for animal advocates in India to be able to learn from you firsthand. That's really very, very precious. So thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, you have put in so much legwork into organizing this. So thank you. And I do want to say, when I say it's going to be so much fun, yes, we're dealing with really, really hard subject matter, I know. But when I say it's fun, it's the community that's fun. It's the learning together. It's exploring each other's images. It's looking at each other's photos and saying, what works here? What doesn't? And learning. Like, there are so many aha moments in coming together as a community of animal photojournalists. Like, it's totally invigorating. And the thing about learning photography is that you never stop learning, ever. So I've been doing photography 25 years or so, but when I discuss your image with you, I have learned something about it. Like, it's endless fun in that regard.
While we were talking, we have a couple of questions here. Mauli says, how can we connect with you for those webinar sessions to learn more from you, Joe?
Okay, well, on our YouTube channel, it's the We Animals YouTube channel. We have a few critiques that you can watch, critiques of stories and critiques of individual images. And 2 of those are with really well-known photo editors from National Geographic and beyond. And so you can learn a lot there. You can also invite me to speak to your photo club or your group of advocates or your NGO, and we can do the same kind of thing. So bring some people together, and you can email us at info@weanimals.org, and you'll find that on the website. And so, yeah, those are some of the ways.
Thank you. Laura says, when I started taking photographs of farmed animals, I did feel guilty because I'm already there and I feel like I'm not helping them enough, but I can't help them escape either. Do you have any advice on how to overcome this?
Well, you've already said you already understand it, and you just have to accept it. There's there's just a lot of sadness about being an animal photojournalist, and one of the worst things about going to these places is leaving without the animals. It just is, but all the more reason to do as much as you can with those images. Do not put 2 of those images on social media and then they're gone in a flash. You have to think about social media, in print, partnerships, what NGOs can use those images. So, and do that with all of your shoots. And someone's unmuted. Neha, if you can hear me, you're unmuted. Yeah, so you just have to be realistic that it's painful to go. It's very painful to bear witness, but there's so much that you can do with those images. I mean, there are so few people taking these images that they are trailblazing. They are historic. And so we have to treat those images with the level of importance that they truly do inherently have.
Someone wants to speak? Is that right?
Okay, I want to speak. May I know the name of the YouTube channel? Maybe
I didn't hear you. Could you know the name of the website?
Yeah.
It's We Animals, WEAnimals.org.
Okay.
WeAnimals.org. Someone could put it in the chat as well.
I'm just putting it right here. WeAnimals.org, is that right? Yeah. Oh, thank you, Nicole. We have a couple of other questions. How blunt has the sensitivity gone of people after the flood in the social media?
Oh, so is the question about like compassion fatigue? Is that?
Probably, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it is about compassion fatigue and how difficult is the role now for the photojournalist, or how to, how more difficult it is now to create those pictures so that we can actually stir people up.
Yes.
Just to compare between the earlier times and recent times, where there is a lot of AI also, and there's a lot of,
Yeah, well, AI is a different beast that I'm not sure we'll talk about today, because it really is a whole other subject matter. It used to be easier to get into places of animal exploitation because there was less suspicion. So access is much harder now. We have to find more creative ways with hidden cameras, for example, and we have to work a little bit harder. But you're also right about compassion fatigue and the ability for people to just swipe away the images that we're creating. And so I'm going to say that it's an uphill battle. However, the world is awakening to animal abuses. It's getting harder and harder to deny, especially because there are so many ways and formats to show these images and also tell these stories. We can tell animal stories through climate stories. We can tell animal stories through pollution stories and human rights stories and so on. And so we just have to be very strategic about what's going to work and where to place the images. We can't just do things in a reactive way, which we have often done. I saw a terrible thing, I'm putting it on social media and I'm going to yell about it. So that's rarely going to work. So be strategic, find the right placements, find the right social media platforms, find the right partners, find the right media, and do things carefully. And things are opening up. We are seeing more media publish increasingly difficult stories because they are just fact and they are just inevitable. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you. There's just one more question here. Let me just get back to it. Yeah, Kathleen says, we're able to submit story ideas at the QR code that was shared earlier. Thank you. Do you mind sharing what that process looks like?
Yes. you can use the QR code. I think that goes to our newsletter, to the website. You can go to We Animals and click on For Photographers. There's a drop down, and this is where you'll see what our needs are, the kind of quality we are looking for, the subject, like our priorities for subject matter, our priorities for region. And you can pitch a story idea that you have. We'll need to see a bit of your work first. Or if you have existing images that are high quality that you want to share with us to have available on our website, you can do that as well. And if that's the case, then you would be joining the many photographers who have contributed work. And I will say that though the work is available for free to anyone helping animals, there are also commercial licenses as well for people who are buying images. And so the photographers do get some royalties at the end of the year. It's not a lot, honestly, and we hope to improve that as we go. Hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Jo. So thank you, everyone. I am going to, because I don't see any more questions. So thank you so much for being here. And Jo, thank you. What can I say? It's just been simultaneously fun, hard, inspiring, powerful, all of that. So, which is just another day in your life, I can imagine. It's hard and powerful and impactful at the same time. But thank you just for existing and doing this and inspiring so many people to do this, because it's so important. Thanks a lot. And thanks everyone else for everything that you do for animals. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for everything you're doing for animals. And thank you for hosting me, everyone at FIAPO. And I cannot wait to be with you there for 3 amazing weeks in India.
Yes.
Thank you, Jo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.